Let's just try that again. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge. Yet another perfect launch here and in Stratosphereville. I hope everybody's doing well. Who is that guy? I have going to keep it pretty short tonight. We're going to jump right into the questions, but I do have some good news, at least good news for me anyway. So I've been doing nothing but whining and complaining about how hard it's been for me to chew through these scripts on this new series that I'm doing for Daily Wire, which is going to be called. One of the reasons why it's taken me so long to get these things done is because originally I pitched it as a show about the Soviet secret police, but there was really no way to tell that story without making it about the Soviet Union itself. So it's called. It's now called An Empire of Terror: A History of the Soviet Union. So its scope has increased, and I may end up doing an 8th episode. I think that's probably been approved. So this was just on my shoulders, and most everybody I know who's ever written for a living gets this kind of writer's block, and mostly that's because while an idea is in your head, it's perfect. You just kind of chew it around a little bit and make it a little more perfect, but you don't have to commit it to paper, so it stays perfect. And then most writers don't want to start writing because once you put words on paper, it's never quite as good as it was in your head. However, in this case, I was at a complete and total logjam, and I couldn't break it. I'd done the first episode, just bam, right out of the gate. I did that weeks and weeks ago. But the second one was just killing me. And I wasn't sure why until I finished it. I just typed the last words of it while we were firing this thing up here. There was so much happening in the second episode, which is about the revolution, about Lenin coming to Russia, and there were so many moving parts. I didn't know exactly what to catch or not to catch or so on. It was, and I'd researched. I think I'd over-researched it. I had notes from 9 different books going all at the same time, and I'm just, what do I do? I've got a mountain, just a mountain of string there, and I got to find the threads that make sense. And I couldn't do it for months. I couldn't do it, and you've heard me whining and moaning and complaining about that. And then suddenly I did it. I suddenly just got the angle. By the way, before I go on, Faith Walker with a $10 super chat. It's not much, Bill, but I wish you a Merry Christmas. I'm the soldier that refused to take the jab a while back. If I ever become a rich man, I hope to thank you better. Well, Faith, you're not going to be able to thank me better than that. If you come into a fortune, it's not that I won't take your money. I'd be very grateful for that, but it's those thoughts and those kind of messages that make all of this worthwhile. So thank you very much for that. That was very, very kind of you. Okay, so here's why I did it. Here's what broke the logjam. I had all of these things in motion. I knew I could not talk about. Well, let me start again. One of the most popular myths about the Soviet Union is that Lenin had created this workers' paradise. He was a kind man, a loving man. He would help, carry logs with the peasants. And he was just this wonderful, wonderful guy who created this beautiful, perfect system. And then in comes Stalin and totally wrecks it by being, a gangster and a murderer and stuff. And the one thing I was so determined to get out of the way I needed to get out of the way in this second episode. The first episode just sets the table. But the second episode, I had to make it clear who Lenin was. And that's a problem facing a black piece of paper blank piece of paper, because where do you start? Do you start with his birth? Would you start him at university? I'd written versions of it where I basically talked about Lenin from the moment he was born. And I couldn't figure out, so many times in a situation like this, and this is obviously Stratosphere Lounge, but it's kind of a Stratosphere Studio issue too. One of the biggest problems, in fact, you could make the case as the biggest problem for writers is, you know what the story is, where do you come in? Where do you come in on it? And I was just struggling with this like a demon. And then finally, I just got it. For those of you not familiar with the story, there were two Russian revolutions in 1917. The first one in February, where the Tsar abdicated and was replaced by the provisional government run by Alexander Kerensky. And then the Bolshevik Revolution, the October Revolution, happened 6 months later. Once the first revolution had happened, though, the Tsar had disappeared. This is what Lenin is waiting for his entire life. He's in Switzerland, and he can't get to Russia. Here's this revolution he's been preaching about and talking about and well, I almost said praying for, but who are we kidding? His entire life is dedicated to this revolution. Now the revolution happens without him. He's in Switzerland. He needs to get back to Russia, and he can't get there. So, using intermediaries, he basically convinced the German high command, who Russia was at war with, to let him travel through Germany on a sealed train. I know I've talked about this on the show just a short time ago. But when I had that, I realized, no, that's the start of the story. And I wrote it as if that train, well, I wrote it truthfully. I said that train was funded and launched by the Imperial Army, German Imperial Army. And it was carrying a weapon into Russia to be deployed against the Russian people in order to take them out of the war. And I wrote the whole start of this second episode as if people were loading a biological weapon onto a train. That's exactly what they did. And yes, it's Sad Wings Raging on YouTube says, injected like a bacillus. That's why episode 2 is called Bacillus. I love coming up with episode titles that are not so on the nose. We did that with the Cold War. I was very happy with that. Yeah, so episode 2 is called Bacillus, and it's about Lenin, and a lot of it is about Kerensky. I know that our friends over at Daily Wire don't want me to give too much of this away, and I don't, but I just realized you just need to hear one thing about this, and then we'll get right back into the questions here. Now, this isn't me. This is available on Wikipedia, but here's one of the greatest tragedies of all time. This is one of the most heartbreaking what-if stories in all of human history. So as Lenin is coming back into Russia, he's traveled across Germany, and he has to cross some water, and he has to get into a town. I want to say it was Torvino. No, it was. Well, I can tell you what town it was. He had to get to this town to get the train. The train would take him to Finland, and from Finland onto St. Petersburg, which was called Petrograd. What was the name of that town? It was Torino. How about that? Okay. Yes, and Sad Wings Raging said Churchill wrote that. Yeah, Churchill wrote that. I got Churchill here too. Let me just find this stuff because I'm really excited. I finally got a chance to, get some movement going here. Churchill said 10 years later, he said, the Germans turned upon Russia the most grisly of all weapons. They transported Lenin in a sealed train like a plague bacillus from Switzerland into Russia. And that's exactly how I wrote the second episode. And once I had that quote, then I had the episode. Now, here in the YouTube comments, Marusha says, Marvel's what if the Soviets won? That's not the what if, because the Soviets did win the revolution. This is the most heartbreaking thing. I knew the basics, but I hadn't fully realized just how immense this was. So, Lenin's crossed Germany with the not only with the aid, but the support of the Germans. He has to get across this body of water. He has to land at Torino, which is in Sweden. And then from Sweden, he goes to Finland. From Finland, he takes a train into Petrograd. But Torino is actually controlled by the British, because the British had been landing so many supplies for Russia in World War I that this particular dock was basically a British outpost. And when the British Foreign Office, heard that Lenin was in transit, they sent a telegraph to Kerensky. And they said to him, Lenin, your arch enemy, the enemy of the man who wants absolute power, Lenin is on his way into Russia. Would you like us to turn him away when he gets to Torino? And Kerensky said, Kerensky replied to that warning from the British government and that offer to stop Lenin, send him back. He replied by saying that his new provisional government, quote, rested upon a democratic foundation, unquote, and that, quote, Lenin's group should be allowed to enter, unquote. Kerensky allowed him to enter because Kerensky believed in the classical liberal democracy. Here's what Kerensky's provisional government stated the day after they came into power with the abdication of the Tsar. This is what his provisional government said they were going to do. Here's their platform. Full and immediate amnesty on all issues political and religious, including terrorist acts, military uprisings, and agrarian crimes. Freedom of word, press, unions, assemblies, and strikes, with spread of political freedoms to military servicemen within the restrictions allowed by military technical conditions. The abolition of all hereditary, religious, and national class restrictions. Immediate preparations for the convocation on the basis of universal, equal, secret, and direct vote for the Constituent Assembly, which will determine the form of government and the Constitution. Replacement of the police with the public militia and its elected chairmanship subordinated to local authorities, elections to the authorities of local self-government on the basis of universal, direct, equal, and secret vote, non-disarmament and non-withdrawal out of Petrograd of the military units participating in the revolution movement, and the preservation of strict discipline in all ranks performing a military service, concurrent with the elimination of all restrictions for soldiers in the use of public rights granted to all other citizens, and to which they tacked on at the end, the provisional government feels obliged to add that it is not intended to take any advantage of military circumstances for any delay in implementing the above reforms and measure. That is pretty close. That is really pretty close to the U.S. Constitution. And the problem was that Kerensky inherited two governments. He inherited the Duma, which was the parliament, which was appointed by the czars. It was just a rubber stamp advisory committee, so they had the legal authority, but they didn't have any support from the public. And then they had the Supreme Council of Soviets. Soviet means council. So these were workers and peasants and soldiers getting together and sending representatives to the Central Soviet in Petrograd. And imagine that instead of us having a two-part Congress where laws go from the people through the People's House of Representatives and then up through the Senate, which used to belong to the states, then on to the president, imagine that there were two separate Congresses in this country and that they were on opposite sides of the mall in Washington, and they had nothing to do with each other whatsoever. Nothing. Each one of them is just constantly trying to gain power and support, and so on. Well, if Kerensky had not been so unbelievably naive and childishly honest, then they would have turned Lenin back. And if they turned Lenin back, there wouldn't have been a Soviet revolution. There's no question about that. Trotsky, who was the closest person at the time and lifelong communist, said, no, if Lenin hadn't been there, nothing would have happened. Nothing. So if they'd struggled through it, right? If they'd struggled through it and turned him back, there's a pretty good chance that Russia could have joined the rest of the world community as a Western-style liberal democracy. And if when he got that message from the British Foreign Office saying, do you want us to stop him? If he hadn't said no, then there would have been no famine in the Ukraine. There wouldn't have been a Russian civil war. There wouldn't have been the Red Terror. There wouldn't have been the Great Terror. There wouldn't have been 20 million Russian people killed by their own governments. And there wouldn't have been a Cold War. That means no Vietnam, no Korean War. There wouldn't have been any activity in Cuba. Cuba would have never gone communist because there would have been no communists. When you think about it, when you think about how close it got, it's enough to simply take you, just take you to tears, just to tears. And these are the kind of stories, and this is what I try to do when I write history segments like Cold War and Apollo 11. The reason it's taken me so long to get past the second episode, and everything from now on is pretty much linear, I'm just going to chew through it, is because there was so much in motion there, and I didn't have the story. I had the data, I didn't have a story. But once I considered Lenin to be what Freudian slip. Once I considered Lenin to be what Churchill described him as a plague bacillus, I realized he's not a biological weapon, he's a mimetic weapon. He's designed to go and take Russia out of the war. That's exactly what he did. And there you go. Maximilian Wilde has an interesting comment on YouTube. He says, because one of the failings of good people, of hobbits, is that they take their enemies at their best, most benevolent words. Yep, exactly. So, I'm not going to get lectured again about having said this 3 times before, but the conversations I've had with what we're going to do with the set and what the production is going to look like is going to make both Apollo 11 and the Cold War just look like child's play. I mean, this thing's going to be really, 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 really well produced. Dave says, will you turn this series into a book? I don't own this work. I just produce it. We had the same problem with the Apollo 11 thing and with the Cold War and America's Forgotten Heroes. It's a work for hire, and I completely understand what that consists of. So Daily Wire will own the rights to this, for which they are paying me. And while they're paying me, I'm happy to be paid, but also it's nice to be able to produce something that is going to be, number one, both timeless, and second, have the marketing and promotion muscle of Daily Wire behind it. So I think this thing's going to get seen by a lot of people. And my hope is that when the members do see it, I'm going to try to get a carve out for this. I think that's extremely unlikely, but I'm going to try for the membership. When people see it, I hope they'll excuse the lack of firewalls or any other written material during the last couple months, because this is just a monster. But this is a moral history of the Soviet Union. I've never heard anybody tell that story before. It is a moral history of the Soviet Union. And the only person I've ever heard talking about this is Jordan Peterson. He's constantly saying, first thing the Soviets did was create a class enemy and then persecute those people and so on. So anyway, Eric Blake apparently had a good, Eric asked, would China have gone communist? I don't see how they could have gone communist because there was no communism for them to go to. It seems exceedingly unlikely, which, by the way, I am going to put into the script, Eric, because I did not even consider that aspect of it. But yes, Mao Zedong now, I guess, is not going to use a Western German intellectual for his domestic revolution. So I don't think China would have gone communist. And when you think about it, one phone call, right? One phone call, and one man who was actually too good. He wasn't doing it for a power play. He was just too good. He was too good a man. He believed it too much. No, we're a democracy. Our new government is a democracy, and a democracy can withstand any form of internal criticism. Let him through. Marusha has a super chat comment. Did the Russians have any past precedents for what communism was or could be prior to Lenin? If not, perhaps they could be forgiven their naivete. One of the things that's so striking about the Russian Revolution, and this is why I have to it's taken me months and months and months of doing nothing other than just waking up every day like, my God, I've got to get these scripts done, and not being able to write anything. Everything pivots on this 6-month period between the two revolutions. So to answer your question directly, no, they had not dealt with anything like Bolshevism, which renamed itself communism. But one of the things that surprised me was just how small and how unpopular the Bolsheviks were. They were grossly outnumbered, and most other socialist revolutionaries who'd been waiting for revolution in Russia for 50 years, most of them thought that they were just bat guano crazy, and that Lenin was essentially a lunatic. He wanted a dictatorship. And everybody else was like, this guy's a complete nut job. So you've got many different authors have written a comparison between Stalin and Hitler. But the real comparison is between Lenin and Hitler, because both of them took minority parties from nowhere and became absolute dictators of their nations. And the only thing they both had going for them was that they were ruthless. Two things. The two things that they had going for them were they were absolutely ruthless. They would do anything, including sell out their own country. And the second thing is they were monomaniacal. They were megalomaniacal, but they were monomaniacal. Hitler never spent a waking moment in the 20s and into the 30s, and frankly, throughout the rest of his life. From the time he started his first meeting at the Socialist Workers' Party, he had one idea in mind, and he never talked about or thought about anything else. He simply was going to take power, and however he did it, he didn't care. Lenin is exactly the same way. When you have somebody that monomaniacal, they usually end up in an insane asylum, but if they have the ruthlessness and the lack of conscience to manipulate people, then in the 20th century, that's what they came. Yeah, Russia could have been a constitutional republic, could have been a constitutional republic in 1917. And in addition to Vietnam and all the rest of it that I mentioned, in Cuba and the Korean War, and as Eric points out, communist China and all of those murders and all of the murders in Laos and all the rest of it, on top of all of that, you wouldn't have a Ukraine war either. So this is why it took me as long as it did, because somewhere in that mountain of data, there was a story thread, and I kept looking for it, and then finally I found it. So that's great. Marisha Dark's got a very clever thing to say. She said about people like Hitler and Lenin, the monomaniacal people. She said they're either committed or they're committed. I may have to steal that. That's rather good. Okay, so let's dive into questions, why don't we? Because I'm going to have to make this one relatively short tonight. I don't know whether I should go to last week. No, I guess people have reposted. I'm just going to dive into the questions here. And I suppose, as much as I hate to admit it, that this is just kind of one of the inherent qualities of the Stratosphere Lounge, is that I will never be able to get to all the questions, at least sometimes. We were doing 4-hour shows there. And we will again, by the way. But my God, I'm so relieved. I typed the last sentence as I was teeing up the thing to go live here today. So now we are on a roll. We'll get this thing out the door, and we can start moving on to even more cool stuff while they prepare for this magnificent vision that they have for the show. So it's going to change. It's going to change the minds of whoever gets to see it. That I'm relatively sure. If you're one of these people say, "Oh, communism's awesome. We should have socialism," you won't believe that when I'm done with you. All right, so let's see what's over at going on at BillWhittle.com here. And before I forget, because I'm prone to forget pretty much everything, let me simply say Merry Christmas to everybody out there. Happy Hanukkah for those of you out there as well who are Jewish. And we will do a show before New Year's, so I'll save the Happy New Year for later. But we did a show about Christmas today, Zoe and I, and you know, it's a message of hope and renewal, and it's really important to not forget that when things appear to be simply spinning completely out of control. So the Christmas present I get from members, I get it every day, not every year, is their membership. And to be able to sit here and do this is a genuine privilege, and I'm very grateful for all of you. All right, let's see what we got in membership for him here. Stratosphere questions and more. 12/22/22. Here we go. All right. Okay, let's see what we got here. This is going to be fun from the gate, I think. From Joe R. Hi, Joe. Hi, Bill. So this apparently is addressed to all of us. So, fellow conservatives, are we sick of losing yet? Republicans lose another winnable election yet again. Georgia. How do Republicans lose Georgia other than cheating? What the hell is going on in this country? I'm sick to death of so many Republicans using the excuse, yeah, but insert name here wasn't a good candidate. Herschel Walker lost because he wasn't a good candidate. Dr. Oz lost because he wasn't a good candidate, as if the alternative is a better choice. Now, that's a profoundly good point, right? As if that's a profoundly good point. Sorry, it's hard for me to see. I'll put on my cogitation spectacles. How were they bad candidates? Because of that attitude, conservatives give Democrats the victory, and by staying home and not voting, they are essentially voting for the Democrat. I think many conservatives are aiding and abetting the destruction of our country by staying at home and not voting for whoever they are voting for because they have some trivial moral objection to them or believe petty rumors about them. Who cares? Do you want to win or not? Democrats stick together and vote blue no matter who, while most Republicans would much rather sit on their hands and watch the country burn rather than vote for an imperfect Republican candidate who's still orders of magnitude better than the Democrat. Many conservatives need to overlook the silly flaws of our candidates and start voting for the bigger picture rather than the person. Herschel Walker isn't perfect, but he was key to slowing down this socialist descent into hell. Now, because many conservatives stubbornly couldn't bring themselves to pull the lever for Walker because of personal flaws, we wind up with someone with terrible ideas that destroys the country, and we have a 51-49 Senate now, and they can ram anything through now. Was it worth it? Well, not to quibble, because it's a superb point, and it's well phrased. They can't run anything through without the House, so at least there's that. So, Bill, how do we fix this? Republicans never seem to be united on anything ever. You can always depend on at least a few Republicans to vote with the Democrats, but never the other way around. We sure had better wake up and smell the coffee, otherwise we are in deep trouble. Until conservatives start cutting off their noses to spite their face, we will continue to lose elections and then lose the country. My God, Joe, I would, if I was running a newspaper, I would print that in its entirety without any changes. Now, King of Clean says, BS, I will not stand if the Republican Party point a finger at me and pull the lever and say, pull the lever or else. And we're getting a little pushback here. Eric says the bad candidate argument fails to take into account back in 2018, Ron DeSantis only won by an insanely close margin. So by that argument, lo and behold, Ron DeSantis was a bad candidate. So look, let me address the core of the issue. A lot of disagreement about this. First of all, let me talk about the bad candidate theory, and not whether or not they were bad candidates. Let me talk about the imperfect candidate, the flawed candidate theory. I think this might have been the very first thing I did at PJTV. It was one of them anyway. My position was that the lesser of two evils is, the lesser of two evils, and that's been my attitude all along. I completely understand the position of people who say, well, this guy is violating my conscience, so I'm not going to vote for him, and you can't make me. I get that. I mean, I understand it. I really do. I don't agree with it, but that's not my business. It's your business. When I am confronted with that argument that, well, this guy, I simply can't bring myself to vote for this guy, the point that Joe makes is, it really is a good point, which is why this is my position on things, right? I have values and I have morals too, and I don't like them seeing, I don't like a candidate that I'm going to vote for representing behaviors or aspects that I don't like. But if your problem with Walker was the abortion issue, for example, by not voting for him, who, at least through the party messaging, would have been part of stopping the Democrats, the Democratic candidate in Georgia is not just a flawed guy when it comes to abortion. He's one of the pro-abortion machines. That's the actual result. You can. I'm not trying to bully or shame anybody. It's just a discussion, right? Again, I'm going to be the last guy who's going to get down on somebody for sticking to their principles. I completely understand it, completely. What I am saying, though, is that Joe's fundamental point is correct on this, whether you like it or not. An election, let's assume that it was a fair election, just for the sake of the argument. An election is essentially a contest to see who piles on the most votes. It's really just that simple. And if you don't vote, then it's not so much that you gave the Democrats a vote. That would be if you switched parties. But if you decide you're not going to vote, then you do give them the win if you don't show up. For those people who may not have voted for Walker for whatever reasons, those conservatives or Republicans, not only do we not have a Republican senator from Georgia who at the very least would be forced by party discipline and the changes in how conservative the message has been getting. I'll get to that part in a minute. That would have been an ally, and with control of the Senate, which would have taken a couple of other things, then you can do an awful lot more than you can with just the House. You can. My position was, we're going to get the House and the Senate, and then send bills like the Fair Play for Our Daughters Act, making men compete in women's sports, if not illegal, then just, no. But we weren't able to do that. Now, with the House, we can stop them because legislation basically begins in the House, and so they can't pass any new laws. They'll try to executive order their way into the dictatorship that they're looking for, and they'll have some success with that. But I think there's a much larger issue here, and I think this addresses the main point that Joe is trying to raise here. And it's not the question of why don't you vote for a flawed candidate. It's much bigger than that. Let me take a quick time out just because this is a super chat here from Riles. McMiles says, not really a question, but you've said before that you gave up on Russian, but you said Cyrillic was why. Cyrillic is not only the easy part, but unlocks 1/10 of Russian that you already knew but didn't know you could read. I did not know that. I've got a Russian wife and I don't speak any Russian because every time I try to, I get corrected on my pronunciation. So here's the bigger issue, right? It's not even a question of let's get Herschel Walker out of the picture, and let's take somebody who I think is just absolutely presidential material and the kind of person that allows me to keep faith in the situation today, and that's Josh Hawley. That guy he's a dream candidate as far as I'm concerned. I mean, he's a dream candidate. So the problem is simply this. When you have Republican leadership like the leadership we have, it doesn't matter if you have the Congress. It doesn't matter if you have the House, and it doesn't matter if you have the Senate. If the Republican leadership is more committed to the status quo than they are to making fundamental changes, then all of the party mechanisms and all the rest of it will be deployed in that direction. And individuals who get the picture, like Rand Paul and Josh Hawley and a couple of others, those people will not be able to accomplish this rebuilding that we would get if we had Republican leadership that was on board with the message, right? On board with the message. And they're not. Well, Infidel 42 says, whoa there, Bill, fundamental change is Obama's thing. Correct, Infidel, yes. And he fundamentally changed this country. And I want to fundamentally change it back again. So that's the problem, right? The problem is these ancient tortoises that we have that are supposedly the Republican leadership. Mitch McConnell would rather be the minority representative, then minority leader, then not be majority leader in a Senate that was Republican. He would rather be in the minority, watch the country burn, so long as he gets to be the go-to guy. And it happens again and again and again. And the Trump thing, the whole Trump phenomenon, has done nothing more important than simply highlighting the fact that there are virtually all establishment Republicans would rather see the Democrats win than somebody from outside the system. We just keep coming back to this again and again and again and again and again. It's not the Republicans versus the Democrats. It's the inside the Beltway versus the outside the Beltway. And he's got to go. And when I heard that he had been reelected to his position, I'm with so many other people. Now, Rand Paul just yesterday or today said, look, if we keep doing this, it's all over, right? We got to change our politics. Where are the Republicans? Where's the GOP? That's a good message. That's the kind of thing we should be happy to hear people saying. But if it turns out that, that this just keeps going on, then what the hell do you do? I was proud and pleased to be a big part of the Tea Party movement, and that movement had some poor candidates. Well, it had candidates that had serious flaws, right? But it was a movement, and I was there for it. It was a 10-year-long movement. What came out of it? Nothing. Why? Well, let's just look back, because if we look back and we can see the direction our wake is, then we know the direction that we're going, right? So let's look back at the Tea Party movement compared to now. It was just 10 years earlier, right? So the Tea Party is a spontaneous eruption of public disgust at the idea of socialized medicine and Obamacare. That's why the Tea Party became the Tea Party. So what's the history, right? What actually happened? Because if we know what actually happened, then we can have a pretty good idea of what is going to happen again if we keep doing the same stupid thing again and again and again. So they put forward candidates. Some of them were good, some of them weren't. But what the Tea Party did was they immediately, right after Obama's election in 2008, in 2010, they gave a huge majority to Republicans in the House of Representatives. And then the establishment Republicans said, well, at least now we can stop them. Now, if we only had the Senate and the presidency, then think of all the things that we could do, all of the good things to shrink government and so on. These are Republicans talking now. So 2 years later, that's what we did. We gave them the Senate as well, 2012. And then what? Well, then we got, or was it 2014? I don't remember. In any event, we gave them they said if we had the House, the Senate, and the presidency, we could change America back. We could get this government back in the box it came in. We could do all of these things. These are Republicans talking. So they said we need the House, the Senate, and the presidency. Got it. I took civics. I understand how it works. So Tea Party comes along, and this wave of support. First time out gives them the House. Second time out gives them the Senate, and the third time gives them a president. And there we were in 2016 with a Republican House, Senate, and president, and we did nothing, right? We did no fundamental changing back to what we were, and the reason is because of what I've been yapping about since the midterms of a couple months ago. We don't have a message. You and I know what we're about, but the Republicans can't spell it out to save their lives. They cannot tell you what their party is about. The reason people vote for brain-dead Democrats, and I'm talking literally now, not figuratively, is because they've got a brand. And Democrats vote the brand. And if Fetterman can't finish a sentence, or if Biden can't finish a sentence, or if Pelosi can't finish a sentence, or if Kamala Harris can't finish a sentence without cackling, they don't care, because they know they're not voting for these individuals. They're voting blue. And the reason they vote blue is because they know what blue means. So why don't we know what voting red means? Why don't we have a clear definition of that? I don't know. I know that it's harder to define a case against change than it is to have a platform of change. But we just simply fail, and we fail at the atomic level right? At the atomic level, we fail. Great example. When so-called President Joe made his speech about how anybody who voted for Trump is essentially a domestic terrorist and that close away from a fascist, he repeated, 13 times during that speech? That it's our democracy, our democracy, our democracy is out, our democracy is under fire, our democracy is under fire. Okay, great. But it's not a democracy. Did we say that? No, we never did. And if the Republicans and the Democrats agree that we are talking about the future of our democracy, then guess which party sounds most like democracy? I'm going to go with the Democratic Party on that one. The fact that we allowed them to make the whole thing about our democracy is why we lose. The second that speech came out, the first thing we should have said is, no, we're not fascist. No. The first thing you should have said is, listen, the president is lying to you. He probably at one time anyway knew the truth. We are not a democracy. We are a republic. And somebody needs to get in front of this and start explaining to the American people what a republic is. Monk in Training, thank you for the super chat, says we have a message. McConnell is the enemy. Yes, but what's the message? What is it, right? What does it mean to be a republic? How can you possibly sell Republican Party if you don't know how to sell a republic? A republic essentially is a democracy that doesn't allow you to vote people into a concentration camp. That's the difference between a republic and a democracy. A democracy allows you to, I see it, Marish, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm just going to have to shut these super chats off because it just takes me right off the rails. I'm just going to give it up. I'm just going to turn it off. I appreciate it, but it's just been the end of this show for me to be looking at those things. Not that I'm not grateful. So why aren't we out there saying this is a republic? This is a republic. It's a much better thing than a democracy. And give it to the Democrats the way they want to hear it. Saying, listen, in a republic, white people don't get to vote black people's rights away. That's why we're Republicans and not Democrats, because if you believe in a democracy, then it's majority rule. There's no protection for individual rights in democracy. If white people have enough of a majority and they want to vote black people into death camps, let's say, that's how it works. That's how it works. On the other hand, a republic allows you to do both. You do have representation. You get a say in how the country's run, but your say doesn't overrule these fundamental principles that protect everybody because they protect individuals. How hard is this? How hard is it? Why didn't somebody just jump in this? Whoa. The president's talking about saving our democracy. First of all, we're not a democracy, and he knows it, or at least he used to. It's not a democracy. It's something better than a democracy, you idiots. It's better than a democracy. It gives you your voice like a democracy, but it also means that you don't get to have the majority. It's not two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner. It's much better than a democracy. And if it wasn't, we'd be a democracy. Boom. No. We can't do it. We cannot do it. I just don't know how. I don't know what to say about it. I don't know if I read this. Monk in Training says we have a message. McConnell is the enemy. Yes. But that's not the message. He is the enemy. He's the enemy because he doesn't know what the message is or doesn't care. I think it's probably the latter. In fact, I'm sure it's the latter. So where is it? Right? When I say that we lose on an atomic level, that's what I mean. When we start debating whether or not we're a threat to the democracy, we've lost. We've lost because we accepted their language. Whenever we talk about abortion as a pro-life versus a pro-choice decision, we lose because we're all about individual choice, right? This isn't about individual choice. Why do we let people continue to say, it's my body, I have a right to do whatever I want to? Of course you have the right to do whatever you want to. We're against being forced to take the jab, right? Of course I should have sovereignty over my body. I completely agree with you, abortion advocates. I think no one should be able to tell you what to do with your body, but it's not your body. It's in your body, but it's not your body. It's got its own DNA. It's got its own heartbeat. It's completely different. If it turned out that it was, in fact, part of your body, you'd have my support, but it's not. And we just keep doing it again and again and again and again and again. We don't ever stop and change the rules of the game. And the person who knew how to do that has left us over 10 years ago now, and I keep repeating it because it needs to be repeated. Andrew Breitbart had a genius level understanding of seeing the rhetorical traps that they have gotten so good at setting for us. Just a master class in it, right? He just really understood it. For those of you who haven't heard the story, I've told it a million times, but basically he said, he was asked on when the Tea Party was starting, somebody showed a picture of like Obama with a bone through his nose, a racist poster of him, and I'm willing to bet you that was presented by a liberal in the flock, because I never saw any of them. But they said, well, Andrew, you're part of the Tea Party movement. What do you think of this? And Andrew said, he didn't dissent, he didn't argue, he didn't defend it, he didn't say what I just said, well, I was a minority. No, he just said, why are you asking me this question? I didn't make that sign. Why are you asking me? Why don't you ask him? He didn't make the sign either. You know? When he was on C-SPAN, and I think it was C-SPAN, and interviewed about, well, Andrew, in your book, you talk a lot about your drug problem, and you had a problem with cocaine as a young person. Do you have any regrets about that, or any changed feelings? What does Breitbart say? Breitbart says, it's funny, I remember when you had Barack Obama on the show here, who is openly bragging about his drug use as a young man. You didn't ask him those questions. Why is that? Right? That's the level we're at. That's the level we need to be fighting at. We need to be at the atomic level and no longer walk into questions that we lose because we answer them. And a first-time chat from Roberto S. Baker. Sorry, it's a pale green. That pale green's almost impossible to read. Roberto, it looks like Roberto S. Bake. If I got it wrong, my apologies. First-time chat. He says, hello, sir. Same to you. And another first-time chat from Chemteb, who says, pot versus cocaine, please. Yes, you're right. It is no comparison. But the fact of the matter is, Breitbart's point was, you didn't ask Barack Obama about his drug use. Why? He talks about it in his book. Why do I get that question and he doesn't? And I have a funny suspicion that if the all-seeing eye of God were to look down on Earth over the past 40 years, I'd be willing to bet you there's a pretty good chance you'd have some imagery of Barack Obama being personally acquainted with cocaine. I find that hard to believe that he didn't. In fact, it's impossible to believe. Impossible to believe that he could have grown up when he did in a culture in Hawaii where everybody was smoking dope, and he thanked the Shroom Club in his yearbook. You know, come on. Breitbart's right about this, and he's gone now. So somebody has to be on this message. But Breitbart could hear it. He could hear the trap in the question, so he refused to answer the question. And he said why he refused to answer the question. Right? How many times in the last week or so, or a couple months anyway, maybe since the 2020 election, since January of 2021, how many times have we seen Republicans grilling Biden appointees about what is a woman? Well, I'm not a biologist, Senator. And we get the look, and to this degree, I've seen it even from Hawley, although he doesn't swallow it nearly as easily as anybody else. So why do we let that happen, right? It's like, I saw this just a couple days ago. Ma'am, you're looking for a judicial appointment or something. You're the president of the National Association for the Awesomeness of Women, or whatever the hell it was called, right? Maybe since you run a women's organization, maybe you can give me the definition of woman. Well, I think it's important that we distinguish, blah, blah, blah. And she wouldn't do it because she can't do it, just like the sitting Supreme Court justice couldn't do it because they can't do it. Why don't we simply say, you are under oath and you are in contempt of Congress. You fully know what a woman is because you've been fighting for women's rights since you were born. So for you to sit there and say, well, you can't define it, is just plain perjury. Why don't we do that? Nope. We fight when I say up here, I don't mean up here in a moral sense. I mean we fight in the froth and in the foam when we should be examining this on the molecular level, and we don't, because apparently we don't know how. Our politicians don't know how. American people know how just fine. So I think that maybe I'll do this when I'm done with this. Maybe I'll write the Republican Party brand message. Maybe that'd be in fact, that's probably should be the next firewall. I should write that as soon as I'm finished with these scripts. I should just sit down and write, here's the message. This is what Republicans are all about. Yeah, in fact, I'm the perfect guy to do that. That's a great idea. Hold me to that. Don't let me forget it. I forget everything, especially when I'm doing the show live. But now I did do that on the virtual presidency. I did that in the virtual address to Congress about guns. Got seen by 30 million people on Facebook when somebody finally linked to it. And I just got down to the fundamental issue. Do you have a right to defend your life or not? Yes or no? Because if you're saying that you don't, if you're saying that a school teacher, 90-pound woman walking out to her car at midnight doesn't have a right to defend herself against three 200-pound men, that she has to be murdered and raped in order to make you comfortable at your cocktail party, then what you're basically saying is that human beings are the only species on planet Earth that is not allowed to defend itself. Bacteria defends itself. There's no way out of that argument. They lose. But they don't. They don't get it. Thank you, Marusha. So Cody's super chat we got a super chat from Cody, and it's expired, but it said, in the UK, the Tories use the word "we're better than Labour" argument and then implement policies to Labour's left. I don't want us to fall for the same trap. Well, I couldn't agree more, Cody, but the problem is not that nobody gets the message. The problem is that the people, I'm talking about politicians now, the problem is that the politicians who do get the message don't have traditional levers of power in Congress, like committee appointments and all the rest of that stuff that I just barely know about because I find it so ridiculous, right? So you'll know when we're serious when Rand Paul or Josh Hawley is elected as Senate Minority Leader. The next election, he'll be Senate Majority Leader. When that happens, you'll know we're serious. Until then, you'll know that we are not just fighting against the progressive left. We're fighting against the establishment that will protect their position at any cost, and they know full well what they're doing, and they don't care. So, hope that got to most of it for you there. Joe, that's about all I got for you. So, moving on. Look at that. Hey, it's Road Rider. Not the question. What the hell are you doing at TSL right before Christmas? It's my job. It's what I get paid to do. Thank you for asking, and I appreciate the sentiment. I've had to miss a couple of Stratosphere Studios, which I regret enormously. But thank you for the comment. And plus, it's not exactly Christmas Eve either. So, but thank you. Now he goes on to say, now the actual question: when, not if, you get the Daily Wire work done, then what is my priority list? What 2022 goal will I abandon in 2023? I remember this question from last time. Animation studio makes sci-fi videos to attract 90% of closet conservative gamers and the 95% part of the purple pie chart. Making short videos on how not to be an idiot. Increasing minutes viewed through right angle format tweaking or topic timelines. Interviews like other big podcasters. Feel free to jump in and add any other ideas bouncing your noggin. Move out of the San Fernando Valley to Nevada, then Colorado, and finally land in Texas. Respectfully submitted by Road Rider, your newest sustaining member. Thank you. And no longer just a basic member. Well, that's very kind of you. We appreciate it. We never say just a basic member, but the basic members are the bread and butter. They're not just basic members. They're just certainly not super members, as you are. So which one of these do I want to do? I want to do all of them. I understand the point you're making is that the desire to try and do all of them means that you don't get to do any of them. I completely get it. I think to answer your question specifically, let's just go back to the things you because it's a fantastic question and certainly one that I am responsible for answering. So animation studio, that is stuff I do at home basically in my free time, and I can continue to push that ball along to the point where I can generate enough content, not enough content to make content, but enough content to get either investors or other people interested in the content. I think that's going to depend on a lot of other things. We got a bunch of people we can talk to about that, but that to me is my ultimate goal. That's my end goal, right? Is making feature film entertainment of any kind. Making short videos on how not to be an idiot is what I'm going to be doing the instant that I stop having to deliver these scripts for Daily Wire, because basically the How Not to Be an Idiot series gives me something fresh to talk about, and it is going to be it's not going to be the replacement for Firewall, but it's going to be written content, timeless written content, and in the same way that the virtual presidency was its own brand and the What We Believe thing was its own brand, I think this would be its own brand too, and I think it would actually get a much wider audience because most of it is not political, but in the end, all of it is political, because the fact that our children can't name two other countries besides ours is not an accident. That is a political objective of the left, is to make American stupid, is to make sure they don't know anything about anything, and most especially that they don't know anything about American government or American history. Those things exactly have to go. So I thought that the thing about this is I could do it much looser fashion, maybe do it on an iPhone, outdoors and walking around kind of thing. And I could be considerably sassier. All of these things make it more appealing to what YouTube has become than me in the suit in front of the burning lake of fire. That is immediate. The animation project is the end goal. How Not to Be an Idiot videos are on deck. Increasing minutes viewed through right-angle format tweaking or topic timeliness. We're undergoing a serious look at our budget. We have to make significant cuts in our spending in 2023 if we're going to stick around. And for a period of a couple weeks, we're shooting Tuesdays and Fridays, and we didn't do that last week, and we're not going to do it tomorrow either. I've got the unpleasant duty of asking people who not only are my employees but also my friends to basically say, I'm not going to ask you to work for a lower rate, but what work can I take off of you so that I have to, because I have to pay you less, and it's just the way it is. That's just how it goes. So the new format of Right Angle is a lot looser. It's a lot more energetic. I think it's much better, a much improved product. And when I get the final answers in from the entire staff, I'll find out how many right angles we can afford to do. It turns out that virtually all of the expense, including the studio really, is here for producing shows like Right Angle and Virtue Signal. If it were just me writing stuff, I do the firewalls on my own. When we first started doing firewalls, Jeremy Boring and I at Declaration Entertainment Against the White Background, we did them in a closet in San Fernando Valley. It was 110 degrees outside, and I was just mopping my face all the time. So we've been looking at either halving the rental on the studio, basically closing down the back room there, and I've been thinking about closing it completely. We have a terrible landlord here, and we've been asking for a lease for 4 months now. Our air conditioning's been out for 3.5, 4 months, and I'm not in the mood to sign a 6-month lease. I want it backdated to when I asked for the 6-month lease, which was August. So that aspect of it is still in the air. So to answer the specific about the Right Angle, I think until we get into the first of the new year, we're going to do the new format. We're going to not shoot twice a week, and then we'll see how much money we have for editing, and that will determine whether we do get to go to twice a week, which I am very inclined to do. All of the stuff that gets cut costs money, we were doing 2 different sets of right angles, plus we were doing the members got the whole thing in one piece, plus we were doing 3 different shows out of each recording session. We did 2 a week, so that's 6 individual episodes. Plus we were cooking out shorts as well. And that all requires editing, and that means it requires money. So I took a look at the shorts, and at first I thought that it's just 300 views or so on. Then I started seeing some of the 30-second shorts that were getting 5,000-6,000 views, which is, given how we've been turned down, not too bad. So I'm going to consider that very carefully. Right angles are bread and butter. It's just basically daily content. So there's that. Now, a number of people are saying what they've always said, which is move to Texas or Florida or someplace, or Tennessee, that doesn't have a state income tax. And yes, that would save me quite a bit of money. But I'm not single anymore, and it's not my decision. It's a group decision, and that's the reality of life. So there you go. Monk in Training, by the way, has a super chat and says, for an idea how not to be an idiot with the ladies. 100% yes. 100% yes. I will do one. Absolutely, I'll do one about that. And Marusha for $20 here. The big orange thing says, what do you think about having guests on Right Angle, like how Lotus Eaters has guest commentators in addition to their regular paid staff? Would add a fresh insight, challenge, and reach, and give you a break now and then. Yes, but I don't think that should be something done by, I don't think interviews should be done by the Right Angle team. I need to do the interviews. And there's a number of people that I would like to interview. The problem for me with interviewing is primarily contacting and scheduling. There are people who have Rolodexes. Look, I did, when Greg Gutfeld was doing Red Eye, I did 5 of them. And he told me that if I lived in New York, he'd have me on the show every week, which was kind of him, but I suspect he was happy with the appearances that I'd done on Red Eye. He now has the most popular late night show in America, and I don't know how to reach him personally anymore. So that's not an insoluble problem by any means, but it is a problem, and I don't have anybody to take care of that. Now, over at Daily Wire, and this is not either envy or any form of criticism. On the contrary, it's just raw, sheer admiration. They have a staff of 25 marketing people. They've got entire regiments of people who do nothing but book interviews and set up the cameras. And here I am fiddling with this freaking webcam, and the sound wasn't turned on. That's the reality of the scale that we're working at here. But again, that is an attainable goal. It is not a expensive thing to do. If I did interviews, and I have done a bunch of them, by the way, we did after hours. I think I probably interviewed at least 20 people on that. I should put those up again too, and I should put up the classics as well. A lot of things to do in 2023, and the most important thing I need to do by far is to make a list, the way that you've given me a list here, Road Rider. So yes, interviews. I feel highly confident that I could interview Mike Rowe. I know there's a number of people who've been involved in voting integrity who are not famous, but who basically would be very interesting. And there's a number of other people that I could reach too. I would especially like to interview guys like I don't remember his first name, like Jameson over at Odin's Men. He's a former Marine who now is owning the internet. All he does is review. Well, all he does, he reviews TikTok videos, and he is putting out 3 videos a day, and they're getting hundreds of thousands of votes, so of views. So I'd like to interview him because he's become a star, and he's earned it because his comments are both interesting and at the same time not disrespectful, and at the same time, well, that's getting to be less the case, and at the same time, they're just honest, sane rebuttals to all of this nonsense. And he has the advantage, again, I admire him enormously, it's not a criticism, but if what you're doing is commenting on other people's work, that's reflexive as far as I'm concerned. And so a lot of it is, a lot of the thing has changed. Japeth Dennis says, "Hey, Bill, I haven't heard you talk about the animation thing you made in a long time. Are you still going to do something with that?" I am. I won't go into it again in detail because I've talked about it many times on this show, but that was just a timing issue. The issue was that the second I finished that thing, I had to get additional income into the company to stay afloat. Like the day after. It was like, okay, I have to do this. And that's when I took the Daily Wire offer, not only for the new series, but to reshoot Cold War, to reshoot America's Forgotten Heroes. And we've got another project that's also been approved. We just don't know what it is yet. And that's the way it is. Needless to say, was not only not happy about that, I was pretty much crushed by it. But this is the thing about reality, is you basically don't get to outvote reality, and so you do what you have to do, and that's what I've been doing. So it's there when I need it. My main look, the animation thing, which I'm so proud of, actually, I just love it, and I love doing it. I love doing it because I got to use all of my tool set, right? I could use music, I could use reversals, I could use villains, I could use action, I could use all of this stuff. And it came out at exactly the moment when I had to leave it. But we have been in discussions about doing feature films about historical figures, not doing documentaries. Can't stress that often enough. And the simplest one of America's Forgotten Heroes that I've already written and done the research on, it's just sitting on my desktop. I've got 5 times what was broadcast written. Then writing that feature film will be one aspect of it, but I'd also like to direct it. And the main thing that I can get immediately out of the animation that I did is to consider the animation as a director's reel, because it is not only directed, it's well directed. It all happened in my back room, but nevertheless, that animation has tracking shots. We got a dolly shot descending into a forest fire. We got 2 shots reversals. We got dialogue. We got everything cut for time. We got fight scenes and all of that. It's a damn well directed piece of movie making, if I say so myself. And so that is also going to be something that I use. And frankly, my hope would be in 2023 that the second Daily Wire project, as yet undecided upon, I did talk to some people out there when I was there for the election coverage, and I think there's an excellent chance that second one will be the first of America's Forgotten Heroes. And the sensible thing to do is to pick the one that is the least difficult to film, because all of those stories are amazing. And the story that I think we'll do first is Frank Luke. And that screenplay is written in my head. And writing an episode of the history series is 9,000 words of densely written stuff. But I've written at least 9 screenplays in my life, and they're much, much easier. So that would be my hope, would be that to follow up on the Empire of Terror stuff, we would start to do relatively low budget, in fact, quite low budget, historical dramas that are not documentaries. And I don't want to do documentaries, even though I'm writing documentary now, I guess. The ability to show something rather than tell them is so powerful that it's just an opportunity I can't pass up. So on some level, Roadrunner, I've got a rough idea that all these blocks basically have to do. I know where the order they need to come in at. I just have a harder time executing because I'm kind of a scatterbrain, and that's just the reality of it. Organization is to say the least not my strong suit, and I was aware of that, and that's the price I pay for being able to put together ideas in a kind of a fluid fashion. Is, yeah, great, I get to combine all these great ideas, and I'm floating around out there in the ether all the time, but when it comes time to get things done in sequence like normal people, I just bounce off it. So in any event, yeah, I would love to do the whole series. I'd love to do. I'd love to direct Frank Luke. I'd love to direct John Paul Jones, and I have to direct Taffy 3. Same thing for. I have to direct the Doolittle raid. With that said, not only do I feel I don't have to, I don't want to direct the Booker T. Washington story. That's something that needs to be directed and probably rewritten by somebody who's got insight into the mindset that I don't have, which obviously means a black person. But nevertheless, my thought is that given the resource, look, Daily Wire, I probably say this every episode, but Daily Wire is just astonishing. It's astonishing what that boy has done with that company. I taught him everything he knows. Every time I go back there, it seems to have doubled or tripled, not only in size, but in actual power, producing power. So they've got the budget to do this. It's set aside. And I think we could, when I say crank them out, I mean, I don't see any reason why we couldn't do 2 of those a year, because instead of 1 every 2 years or 3, because they have the entire post-production tail in place. I don't have to edit this myself. I don't have to do any of that, right? I can write it, go out, direct it, it goes to an editor, ba-boom, we're on to the next one. So in the perfect world, the world I'd like to live in, I would be doing what Steven Spielberg did at the height of his career, before he made the Fablemans, which is one of the worst movies I ever saw in my life. I would like to be in a situation where it's like, okay, at 10 o'clock in the morning, I have a pre-production meeting on the one we're about to do. And then, later that night, I'm looking at dailies or looking at an edit on the one we just finished, and I'm getting ready to go out and shoot another one, that kind of thing. So, and I think that's not only doable, it's not only possible, it's likely if I can get this, if I can get the BillWhittle.com financial situation straightened out, because it's taken a lot of my energy and time, and it shouldn't, because I should have the time and energy to do all of these things. So, again, it's a profoundly good question. I'm very grateful for it. And not only do you get an answer, you deserve an answer on things like this, because nobody's more aware of my own mercurial squirreliness than I am. So Eric Blaze says, would another membership drive help? Yes, it would. It would help a lot, and that's why I'm gonna wait until I have something that I can present as, here's, if you weren't a member before, here's why you might want to become one now. Last time we did it was to get Zoe on board. This time it'll be, here's this Don't Be an Idiot series. Here's a chance for you to basically educate your kids. And in order for me to do that membership drive, I have to have at least one, and probably I should have 2. They're not hard to produce. And they're not hard to write. I don't see them much more than 5 minutes. So when I get 1, possibly 2 in the can, just to show that, look, 1 data point is a point, right? 2 points is a line, 3 is a trend. But in any event, that's what I plan to do. But I don't want to come out. Look, I don't want to get into this again. I can't stand the idea of, and it's my own attitude. I understand that. I'm consciously aware of it, but it's so powerful subconsciously for me that I can't get past it. I just feel like a guy sitting there on a corner with a little tin cup, shaking it like, buddy, can you spare a dime? And I can't stand that. I mean, I just can't stand it. I can do a new membership drive if I feel like I've got some new product to sell, but just to keep ringing that bell to me is just, it's not just not effective. It's just, I find it embarrassing, and I need to get over that, obviously. It'd be nice if I had a fundraising team. That'd be lovely. But look, I'm the typical, I'm in the exact same kind of case as somebody like well, the person who I most closely resemble, which of course would be Elvis Presley. Elvis was a tremendous singer, and more than that, he was an icon. But Elvis couldn't handle his own business. Not that he didn't have the time to, he didn't have the brain to. And thank you for that, Road Rider. It's very kind of you. Eric Blake says, Bill, that's like being unable to put a price tag on your product. That's why I have a problem with it. I have a problem with me going out and selling it because I don't see a price tag on my product, because there isn't one, right? The stuff I produce gets seen for free. And also, it's intangible. If I was selling shoes, it'd be a whole other story. But in any event, that's basically where I want to go. P7 2017 says, Bill, I get it, but your message really does need to get out. You have to get around the establishment guys and get it to the people. Yes. What I find about this is that for reasons that in the best case scenario are flattering and in the worst case scenarios are terrifying, our views are being turned down to the degree that like 8,000 now is like, wow, that's a big day. That's a big segment. It drives me bat guano crazy. So talking about this stuff actually really helps. It helps me see things, and it also gives me feedback. So I said I had to do an early show tonight. I got through all of 2 questions. I'm going to have to wrap it up, but I've got 2 super chats I'm going to do, and then I am hoping to be back on Monday, but I will definitely be back next Thursday. And I know this is a short one. I apologize for that, but I've got a bunch of things that just have to get done, and that's that. So just to wrap it up with the super chats here, R. Graw says, I'm a teacher and I've used a clip of your work when explaining the steps on how we got to the moon. The Apollo and Cold War podcasts were out of this world. Thank you for the content as an educator. Well, thank you very much, R. Graw. Thanks for the super chat and thanks for the compliment. One thing that has been hammered into me over the last year or two is that if I'm only doing something like commenting on the day's politics, I'm wasting my time. I remember Scott Ott said so clearly after he saw, I think he heard the America's Forgotten Heroes. I think he went to listen to one and then he just binge listened to all of them. We set up for the right angle as soon as he finished that, and his first words out of his mouth were, "Why are you here? Why are you doing this? You should be doing that." And yeah, I'm doing this so that I can do that. If I don't do this, then we got nothing. So thank you for that. It's good to know that educators feel it too. And I think that this "don't be an idiot" thing, when I'm thinking of, I purposely decided to do as the first one the thing that I knew best, because that way I would be able to figure out the kind of shell that this thing needs to go into, because airplanes is something I know really, really, really well. And to give you a very quick example of why I think these things could be valuable, these "Don't Be an Idiot" series, is there have been probably endless number of videos of people saying, well, how does an airplane fly? And people tell them how they fly. But that's not the question they really want answered. They don't want to know how they fly. They want to know why they fly. Why does it fly? You've got a jumbo jet there, and I'm moving here, and there's nothing here. It's just air. How does that thing stay up in the air? Well, we have the control surfaces and the forces, and thrust versus drag and lift versus gravity. No. Why is it able to actually leave the ground? So that's what I tackled first. The first thing I have to do in "Don't Be an Idiot About Airplanes" is I have to show the power of air when it is either compressed or moving at high speed. Right? See an explosion like that one in Lebanon, that horrifying thing in Lebanon? What's knocking all those windows in? It's air. It's air compressed to the point where it's practically solid. Why? What is blowing these trees over in hurricanes, and what's taking entire automobiles and sending them up into the sky? It's just air. It's just air moving very, very fast. Once you can get that established, then you can get into things like airfoils, and people understand why it flies, not how it flies. So that's the kind of thing I'm working on. Monk and Trading Super Chat says, in my opinion, you should try to merge with Daily Wire and cut a deal where your people get membership, then move from Cali. I've got orders out tomorrow. Semper. Yeah, Semper to you too, buddy. Congratulations, and we're proud of you. Look, I don't know how many times I've been over the move from Cali thing. I'm not blaming this on Natasha. On the contrary, I really like it here. But if I were by myself, I'd probably be in a small cabin in Coeur d'Alene. But I'm not. And my wife was born in Siberia and grew up and spent the last 10 years in Moscow, and she's tired of being cold, and I understand that. So I'm sure that will eventually come. Right now, it's not my decision to make by myself. Yes, Japheth Dennis gets it exactly right. Funny, that's a profoundly deep observation, and I got to go. But basically, he says, "Don't be an idiot" is kind of like that YouTube dad channel that teaches boys how to shave or tie a tie. That's precisely what I had in mind when I decided to do it. Right? Precisely what I had in mind. Oh my goodness. Rob Rass with $100 super chat. Merry Christmas to you and Mrs. Whittle. Well, thank you, Rob, and to all of you as well, and to all of you for everything. There is. I close every show with this. There's no way for me to express how grateful I am for this and this opportunity. And sometimes things just get not only just hectic and organizational issue, but watching the stuff that happens and having to watch it is soul destroying. It's just terrible. But it's because of the comments, and it's because things like this $100 super chat thing. And I understand not everybody can do that. I get it. Any kind of all these supportive messages are what keep me in the fight. And so I'm very, very grateful. Roy Hamill wants to know, did Bill get to any of the Facebook questions? Oh, Roy, you sweet summer child. I barely got through the members' questions. But again, tonight is a short one. I'm at 1:22. So that's real short for us. But I do have a lot of things that I have to get to tonight, and I didn't want to miss the show again. So there we go. All right. Anyway, Merry Christmas to all of you out there, and Happy Hanukkah as well. And yes, and perfectly said by Taps 556, God bless us, everyone. That's not going to be improved upon. Merry Christmas. God bless us, everyone. And, don't forget that this whole holiday is about hope and rebirth and renewal. And we need some of that. So, again, thanks to our members especially. Thanks to all of you for joining in and watching. And we'll see you next time right here on Stratosphere Lounge.